Good morning. My name's Bill Scrimshire. I've been a member of this church for 30 years or approximately, and I'm pleased to welcome you to church on this beautiful first day back on standard time. I see you all remembered to change your clocks. There are some empty seats, but I think those are people who are going to watch the noon kickoff of the Chiefs. It's good to have you, and we have people with us on live stream. We're happy to have those with us also. We also, may I remind you, we have a Sunday Plus lunch today, and the proceeds will go to the general fund, certainly a worthwhile cause, except if you're a visitor, your lunch is free, and we hope you'll join us. And speaking of visitors, most of us started out here as visitors because not many people in this part of the country were born UUs. So if you're a visitor, as I once was, we especially welcome you, and we welcome you to lunch. We like it if you could feel comfortable standing and introducing yourself, telling us where you're from and maybe why you came, or if members want to introduce a visitor. Do we have visitors who would like to introduce themselves or be introduced? There's one starting right back there. This is how it's done, sir. Go ahead. Oh, great. Oh, great. Well, we see, that's what we like. A little information is what we like. Who else? Who else is a visitor or maybe a member? Here's one.
Good morning. My name is Brian. I'm
Great.
with Anthony.
Good to have you all here. Others that I may have missed? Way back there, yes. First time? Great. Maybe you'll come again if you're no farther away than that. Are we finished? We'll go on as long as we need to. If you're a visitor and chose not to introduce yourself, you're equally welcome. Thank you.
I'm Anthony Edwards. I'm the music director here, for those of you who don't know me. And I'm very happy to have Ryan Gove here this morning from the AIDS Service Foundation. He's going to tell us a little bit about that later. But I wanted to introduce you to our newest staff member. Lucas Teston is here, and he's going to the conservatory. Come on up, Lucas. He's going to the conservatory and getting his master's in French horn performance. And he's from Columbus, Georgia, and we're very excited to have him on staff. So if you are needing anything to do with audiovisual, Lucas Teston is our newest staff member. Please help me welcome.
Welcome, Lucas. And I'm going to give him a second to turn on my mic. There we go. Welcome, Lucas. Thank you. And welcome, everyone. Welcome to All Souls on this, our namesake weekend. Welcome, indeed, all souls, the living and the dead, the remembered and the forgotten. Welcome to those who grieve and to those who rejoice, to those needy of heart and those of generous spirit, to those whose days are empty and to those whose time is never enough. Welcome to those who move with assurance and to those who are shadowed by despair. Welcome to those who endure and to those who resist, to those who repent and to those who forgive. Welcome to those who create the future and to those who preserve the past, to the humble and the proud, the shy and the brave. Welcome all souls to this covenant community of memory and promise. As we begin our time together this morning, I invite us to acknowledge that this church building stands upon traditional ancestral grounds of the Osage, Oto, and Missouri people, indigenous to this area before the arrival of European settlers. The place where we gather today once sustained the lives of these native communities who thrived in this area and made their homes here in harmony with forces of the natural world. They were stricken by unfamiliar diseases brought by white settlers, stripped of their homelands by violence, fraud, and government treachery, forcibly relocated to serve the profit and convenience of European colonial powers, and killed outright when they sought to resist these oppressions. Let us also acknowledge the Wyandot and Shawnee communities who were first brought to this region by forcible relocation from other areas, and after rebuilding their lives here, were once again removed further west. We are called to recognize and continually support and advocate for the sovereignty of the indigenous nations native to this territory and beyond. Let us commit to hold ourselves and others, including government at all levels, accountable to correct past injustice, to honor treaties and promises made, and to seek right relations with these peoples in the present and the future. As people of many cultures through the ages have made fire as a signal of sacred intention, we kindle this chalice flame. May it center our spirits in this time together so that we may be renewed for our work in the world, for the love of our neighbors, and for the unending quest for truth, understanding, and peace.
Good morning. My name is William, and I light this chalice for a free and responsible search for truth and meaning.
Did it go out? Not to worry. Good job. Now I invite you to rise as you are able, and let's once again say to one another the words of promise that create our community. Together we affirm, goodwill is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. And will you remain risen for our opening song? Blackbird has spoken like Another time, it's good. All right. Yeah.
And we have to give him a little bit of a break. When we were searching for a new audio-visual tech, Mark Gibbons asked me to find somebody with 3 hands. And I didn't do that, but Lucas is fantastic, and there's the learning curve going on. So thank you very much. Thank you, Lucas.
Yeah. We are good. We can roll with almost anything. So right now, I'd love to have the kids come down so we can make a little noise and so that you can hear the pictures, because we see the pictures, because we have a story to share. Great. Hi. Okay. Yes. Young and young at heart. It's all good. Hi. Okay. So, the Cherokee people say, Ojali Heliga, to express gratitude. And that word is a reminder to celebrate their blessings and reflect on their struggles every day throughout the year and across all the seasons. So I'm going to ask you all to learn to say that word with me. So can you say, Ojali? Ojali. Heliga. Okay. Ojali. Heliga. All right, now you all can participate. Ojali. Heliga. All right. Now, let's put it together, and I want all the kids to try to be just as loud as all of them, okay? Ready? Just the kids. Ojali Heliga. Oh, you got it. Good. All right. And now everybody, can you? That's it. Okay. So these are some pictures of things that Cherokee people and children are grateful for during all these different seasons. When the cool breezes blow and leaves fall, we say Ojali Heliga as shell shakers dance all night around the fire and burnt cedar scent drifts upward during the great new moon ceremony, as we clean our houses and wear new clothes and enjoy a feast and forget old quarrels to welcome the Cherokee New Year. That's in the fall. We collect buckbrush and honeysuckle to weave baskets to remember our ancestors who suffered hardship and loss during the Trail of Tears. And we have hope as our grandma cradles the newest member of the family and reveals his Cherokee name. And in the winter, as the bears sleep deep and snow blankets the ground, we say, Ojali Heliga. There you go. While elders share stories and we savor buttery bean bread and steamy hominy soup, and we feed our animal and bird friends. As older children teach the younger ones how to make corn husk dolls and play cane flutes. And while we gather to remember an uncle who has passed on, and as men cuddle babies and sing traditional lullabies in Cherokee. And then in the spring, when showers fill streams and shoots spring up, we say, Ojali Heliga. While men sing, asking for thunder and lightning's protection of the emerging sprouts that the women are tending, and we gather wild onions, which are spring's first food, and serve them together with hen's eggs. And we practice patience while we sew moccasins and coil clay to build pots. We plant strawberries, which is an ancestral story's sweet-smelling reminder not to argue with each other. And we embrace a clan relative who is heading off to serve our country. And then in the summer, when the crops mature and the sun scorches, we say, Ojali Heliga. When we grasp our spears and wade into the cool creek to catch crawdads for supper, as we sink our teeth into the season's first harvest at the green corn ceremony. And while we click-clack our sticks and chase a small ball and fling it high at the stickball game pole, and when we recall our ancestors' sacrifices to preserve our way of life, to celebrate history, and listen to our tribal leaders speak at the Cherokee National Holiday. Every day of every season, we say, Ojali Heliga, which means we are grateful. And we are grateful for all of you, and now we will let you go to your classes while we sing. And Ryan, I believe you have some words for us, or Anthony's got some.
Every month we choose a different not-for-profit in the Kansas City area to share our offering with. And this month, in commemoration of World AIDS Day, December 1st, we are choosing the AIDS Service Foundation of Greater Kansas City. The AIDS Service Foundation helps provide education and prevention awareness and monies and shelter and medical and emergency services to the over 5,700 men, women, and children who live in the greater Kansas City area and are affected by HIV/AIDS. We give money, we're in an umbrella organization that feeds money to different organizations in the community, and we give to the main four AIDS service organizations, Hope Care Center, Save Inc., Thrive, Health Connection, and Kansas City Care Clinic. Ryan Gove is here this morning. He's the Vice President of Education and Outreach for the AIDS Service Foundation, and he's going to tell us about the other areas that we give to the community grants here in Kansas City. Help me welcome Ryan Gove.
Thank you, Anthony, and thank you again for having us. It's important to note that even though the AIDS Service Foundation has been around since 1992, the height of the HIV epidemic, we've only been focusing on education for 2.5 years. We were literally just a fundraising organization, and about 3.5 years ago, we came together as an organization with the community and decided that we needed to be doing more than just raising money. If this disease was going to end, we needed to be the leader in education in our city. So I'm lucky enough to serve as our first vice president focusing on education. And one of the exciting things that I get to do is to give out education community grants to smaller 501c3 nonprofit organizations who are doing either education or prevention. Just a little less than a month ago, we approved this year's grants, and we were able to give out over $55,000 to 8 organizations, which is not just the most we've given out money-wise, but the most applications we've ever had as well. And I just wanted to share with you a few of the exciting things that these groups are doing. Some of the groups we're partnering with include the Arts Asylum downtown, the Calvary Community Outreach Network with Calvary Community Baptist Church, and St. Luke's Crittenden's Children's Center, which is the city's oldest psychiatric children's hospital, and they do a lot with foster care. We've partnered a long time with the Coterie Theater, which many of you are probably familiar with, our award-winning theater for children and young adults. And they produced the Dramatic Health Education Project, which matches medical and nursing students from KU Med and UMKC with local young actors that go into high schools and talk about STDs, HIV, and give them an opportunity to ask any questions you could possibly think about. So it's an opportunity in schools that don't talk a lot about sex at all, So that's really exciting. We're a new partner this year is the Kansas City Center for Inclusion, which is not just doing education, but also starting up support groups for trans folk who are HIV positive. We are really excited to partner with the Planned Parenthood of the Great Plains as they're opening their new office downtown in Kansas City, Kansas. It's not a place that has a lot of free testing, and so it's exciting to get education and testing in that area. Sheffield Place is also another great organization that we partner with for a while that offers transitional housing to homeless women and their children. They do education and testing while women are living with them, and after they've gone on to actually secure permanent housing as well. So they're a great partner. And lastly, Transformations is a younger organization that essentially offers support groups for youth and their parents, specifically young teen trans women and their parents. While they have a lot of great information to share for those who are able to come out and sit in their monthly youth meetings, we find that we know that the safest place for teens who are thinking about or trying to transition is in the safety and security of their own home, or maybe even their own bedroom, watching YouTube videos and learning different things. And so with some of the money that we were able to provide them, they're actually going to be taking the content that they share in person in their youth groups and make videos that they can put online. And so the young transitioning women at home can actually get that information as well. So those are just some of the great things that are happening outside of our main aid service organizations that we're happy to partner with and support. And we can't do that without continued support of the Kansas City community. So I would be remiss if I didn't mention that on World AIDS Day, or when we celebrate World AIDS Day this year, we're going to be doing our events on November 20th. We will actually have our second community conversation on HIV right here in the afternoon. Thank you again for letting us use this wonderful space. From 3 to 4:30, and we'll have our guest speaker, Ken Williams, who's an activist nationally, as well as a panel of local individuals talking about HIV stigma and how we can end that in Kansas City. So thank you again for having us today. We appreciate you very much.
The offering will now be given and gratefully received.
Will you join me in the words of dedication for our offering? We dedicate our offerings and our actions to the mission at the heart of this congregation, to build a respectful, caring community, to inspire personal and spiritual growth, and to create change toward a just and compassionate society.
it is completely natural that you would want to participate in celebrating the Day of the Dead. You, like all human beings, have lineage, ancestors, departed family members. You have skulls under the skin of your own faces, bones beneath your flesh. Like all mortals, you seek ways to understand death, to befriend it and celebrate it in the context of celebrating life and love. I understand. In the tradition of indigenous peoples and of ceremony, you, in your own grief and missing your loved ones, have not been turned away. You arrived at the Dia de los Muertos ceremony shipwrecked, a refugee from a culture that suppresses grief, hides death, banishes it, celebrates it only in the most morbid ways: horror movies, violent television. Death is dehumanized, without loving connection, without ceremony. You arrived at El Dia de los Muertos like a pilgrim, starving, unequal to survival in the land of grief, and the indigenous ceremonies fed you and took you in and revived you and made a place for you at the table. And what have you done? Like the pilgrims, you have begun to take over, to gentrify and colonize this holiday for yourselves. This year, as midterm elections near and immigration reform gets bandied about on the lips of politicians, urban young white voters will wear skull masks and watch puppets with dancing skeleton bones and party and drink and celebrate. But those same revelers will not think for a single second of deaths of refugees trying to cross a militarized border to escape from the deaths caused by NAFTA and CAFTA and U.S. foreign policies and drug policies and dirty wars in Mexico and Central America. Amidst the celebration, there will be no thought for genocide in Juarez, for murdered and missing indigenous women in North America. As they drink and dance in white, organized, and dominated De los Muertos celebrations without a thought for us, except perhaps the cleaning or custodial staff that will clean up after them, we, the Latinas, learn what we learned in 1492 about the invaders. You want the golden treasures of our culture, but you don't want us. Since then, white people have shown that they don't value indigenous life, but are fascinated by indigenous spirituality.
For many Italian Americans, Columbus Day is their day to celebrate Italian heritage and the contributions of Italian Americans to the United States. It was adopted at a time when Italians were vilified and faced religious and ethnic discrimination. The first commemoration came in 1892, a year after a mass lynching of 11 Italian Americans by a mob in New Orleans. Italian Americans latched onto the day as a way to mainstream and humanize themselves in the face of rampant discrimination. It became a national holiday in 1934 to honor a man who, ironically, never stepped foot in the United States. Columbus anchored in the Bahamas. For Native Americans, Columbus Day has long been hurtful. It conjures the violent history of 500 years of colonial oppression at the hands of European explorers and those who settled here, a history whose ramifications and wounds still run deeply. We now know a great deal about this history and the way that Columbus and his people behaved when they came to this continent, says Shannon Speed, a citizen of the Chickasaw Nation and director of the UCLA American Indian Studies Center, which include pillaging, raping, and enslaving and killing those who are already here. That's not something we want to celebrate. Indigenous children are going to school and being forced to hear about and honor the person who set in motion the genocide of their people. That's incredibly painful. It creates ongoing harm.
I go to sit with my Sitka spruce tree grandmother to think. I am not from here, just a stranger who comes with gratitude and respect and questions of how it is we come to belong to a place. If people do not feel indigenous, can they nevertheless enter into the deep reciprocity that renews the world? Is this something that can be learned? Where are the teachers? I have to be reminded that the plants themselves are our oldest teachers.
There is a low circle of leaves, pressed close to the ground with no stem to speak of. Our people have a name for this round-leafed plant: white man's footsteps. It arrived with the first settlers and followed them everywhere they went. It trotted along the paths through the woods, along wagon roads and railroads, like a faithful dog so as to be near them. The common plantain.
At first, the native people were distrustful of a plant that came with so much trouble trailing behind it. But they knew that all things have a purpose. When it became clear that white man's footstep would be staying on Turtle Island, they began to learn about its gifts. In spring, it makes a good pot of greens before the summer heat turns the leaves tough. The people became glad for its constant presence when they learned that the leaves, when they are rolled or chewed to a poultice, make a fine first aid for cuts, burns, and especially insect bites. They can halt bleeding right away and heal wounds without infection.
Plantain's strategy was to be useful, to fit into small places, to go exist with others around the dooryard. to heal wounds. It is so prevalent, so well integrated, that we think of it as native. It has earned the name bestowed by botanists for plants that have become our own. Plantain is not indigenous, but naturalized. This is the same term we use for the foreign-born when they become citizens of our country. This wise and generous plant, faithfully following the people, became an honored member of the plant community. It's a foreigner, an immigrant, but after 500 years of living as a good neighbor, people forget that kind of thing.
Maybe our human task is to follow the teachings of white man's footstep, to strive to become naturalized to place, to throw off the mindset of the immigrant. Being naturalized to place means to live as if this is the land that feeds you, as if these are the streams from which you drink, that build your body and fill your spirit. To become naturalized to place is to know that your ancestors lie in this ground. Here you will give your gifts, meet your responsibilities. To become naturalized is to live as if your children's future matters, to take care of the land as if our lives and the lives of all our relatives depend on it, because they do.
So let's start by acknowledging that it's complicated, and retreating into any sort of naive simplicity isn't going to help. For instance, this week, the Congressional Hispanic Caucus created an ofrenda for Dia de los Muertos in the offices of Representative James Clyburn, a Democrat from South Carolina. This temporary altar holds the photographs of 14 people, most of them children, who have died in U.S. government custody while attempting to enter or remain in this country, along with flowers, candles, and other traditional decorations. James Clyburn is not a member of the Congressional Hispanic Caucus. I am guessing that his office was chosen for this because in his role as House Majority Whip, its location is more spacious and accessible than some others. Several Congresspeople who are themselves Hispanic and members of the caucus have created a tradition of creating ofrendas in their own offices. This year, Representative Raul Grijalva of Arizona honors the memories of Cesar Chavez and his former colleague John Conyers, who died last week. Apparently, this is the first time that the Hispanic Caucus as a body has set up a joint public ofrenda. What are we to make of this? Is it politically partisan? Does it violate the separation of church and state? Is it exploitive cultural appropriation or an authentic expression of diversity? I am inclined to think that we have more immediate and weighty concerns to address with our congressional representatives just now than their choice of holiday decorations. But then symbols carry meaning, and meaning shapes our collective lives. Which is why potentially secular cultural holidays like Thanksgiving and Columbus Day are of concern to religious community. First, because they deal in both values and mythologies, and second, because what we celebrate is a function of what we want and what we seek to protect. Holidays encode culture in powerful, visceral ways through taste and food, through family and memory, through visual spectacle and costume, through music and motion and ritual and public customs. All of these are learning modes that mostly bypass judgments of the rational mind. So if we are to be thoughtful about what it is that we are teaching ourselves and others in our celebrations, we need to consider these matters before we find ourselves in the midst of the parade or sitting down to the table laden with turkey and pumpkin pie. Now, let me be clear that I do not propose that we should never let down our skeptical guard, or that we should go around debunking Santa Claus and the Easter Bunny at every opportunity. Such an attitude makes us spiritually shriveled, as well as unwelcome company to most other folks. Our full humanity is experienced only through enthusiastic participation in all these visceral modes I just described. Nevertheless, we can and should take responsibility for the underlying messages conveyed by our cultural celebrations, so that they do not become unintentional reinforcements of the very privileges and oppressions that we are working hard in other conscious realms to dismantle. Moreover, I think that Aya de Leon is correct when she suggests that if we do not have a richly evocative repertoire of celebrations in our own culture, the spiritual starvation will drive us to misappropriate and exploit the traditions of others. I also tend to believe that nothing powerful is pure. The symbols that have the deepest meanings always contain some ambiguity for contrast and heightened flavor. And this is good because history is mostly like that too. Everything admirable has its downside as well, and every tragedy contains something to cherish. The place to start, it seems to me, is at the intersection of history and mythology. Every American holiday that I know of has some historical origin story, usually embroidered with a narrative mythology which interprets these events in the service of a particular meaning. A number of these, including Columbus Day, Thanksgiving, and the 4th of July, are national origin stories, and their associated mythologies have served to encode European settler claims about discovering the American continent, undergoing hardships in order to build societies here, and creating a new nation of liberty and justice for all. It is certainly true that the explorer Christopher Columbus sailed to this hemisphere several times. It is also true that a somewhat disoriented boatload of religious zealots and others landed on the northeastern coast and nearly perished there before establishing an outpost and welcoming reinforcements from England. It is true that a group of settlers later staged a successful rebellion against their long-distance king. These are events that our school books and pageants and songs have taught our culture to celebrate. But their sanitized mythologies have left out crucial ambiguities from all of these accounts. Specifically, they have taught us that what mattered was what the white colonial settlers did and said and wanted and felt, while the impact of their presence on the people already here or anyone not like themselves was irrelevant and should be ignored. The popular American origin mythologies have also emphasized the nobility of motives attributed to the settler heroes. Columbus was thought to represent reason, intelligence, competence, determination, and dauntless courage in the face of ignorant and fearful people who believed that the world was flat. The Plymouth colonists were held as seekers of freedom who strove to build a pious community of justice, charity, and self-sufficiency in the threatening wilderness. The founding revolutionaries were idealistic patriots who created a nation of liberty, equality, democracy, and human rights by risking their lives to defy a corrupt tyrant. Are these not the familiar legends of holiday clip art? Yet when looked at from the perspective of the marginalized characters, these stories unfold very differently. Columbus was a not particularly competent sailor who vastly undercalculated the circumference of an earth that his contemporaries were well aware was spherical. His sailors were inclined to mutiny because of the way he treated them, not because they thought they were at risk of falling off the edge of the planet. He was insatiably greedy and cruelly abusive to the native people he first encountered and allowed the rest of his crew to be as well. Many people who never came within miles of a European died because of the smallpox, measles, and influenza that spread quickly through a population with no naturally developed immunity. There were an estimated 250,000 indigenous Taino on the island of Hispaniola when the Europeans landed there in 1492. 25 years later, there were fewer than 14,000. It is likely that an extermination at this massive scale was unforeseen and unintentional, but it's certainly no occasion for a party 500 years later. More deliberate were the policies Columbus employed as viceroy and governor throughout the islands of his domain, which included widespread maiming, rape, forced labor, and arbitrary execution in order to create terror throughout the population. Ironically, these very tactics demonstrate his membership among the European conquerors who would come to dominate North America over the following centuries, a membership that immigrants of Italian descent were eager to claim for themselves by establishing Columbus Day as a national holiday at a time when their cultural status as white Americans was in doubt. Today, it seems to me that, shall we say, that ship has sailed. Any conception of justice would be better served by shifting, as a growing number of cities and states are doing, to a holiday consciously celebrating the history and contributions of Native Americans. The myth of Columbus as a hero of any kind is in itself a form of colonization, a way of erasing the lives and dignity and suffering of people whose cultures and communities were destroyed by his personal arrogance and greed. One of the important qualities to celebrate is the resilience of Native American nations, despite long and brutal efforts to literally and figuratively exterminate them. They were on the side of nevertheless she persisted long before Elizabeth Warren came on the scene. And long before the current administration shocked the conscience of the nation by separating refugee children from their parents at the border and locking them up, generations of indigenous children were forcibly removed from their families and placed in boarding schools, where every effort was made to eradicate their native languages, appearance, dress, religions, and customs, and where too many of them died. It is an act of colonization to steal a person's land and livelihood, certainly. It is also an act of colonialism to destroy their lineage of ancestral knowledge, to appropriate and exploit their spiritual practices, or to violate their holy places. It is surely an act of colonialism to renege on solemn treaties and violently attack those who ask for promises to be fulfilled. It is just as certainly colonialism to act as though peoples and cultures are somehow lost in the mists of time and no longer exist, when they are in fact a very present lived reality. Perhaps the most important decolonizing we can do within ourselves and among others is to recognize and celebrate the ongoing vitality of many Indian nations and tribes. The first step in releasing ourselves from the grip of our own mythology is to listen with genuine humility and curiosity to someone else's story. Which brings us to Thanksgiving, also a cultural holiday, which has erected on a slender scaffold of historical fact a mythology of national origin that again erases the reality of what those events entailed for the people who were already here when the colonists landed. From a settler's perspective, they themselves are naturally the heroes of the tale. It was their own endurance and mutual support in hardship that saw them through the disastrous early years. The natives were at first an exotic object, potentially helpful, potentially to be converted to Christianity, but also quite possibly in the way. Very quickly, they are seen as the merciless Indian savages that they will be called 150 years later in the colonists' Declaration of Independence from Britain, and as they will remain identified more than a century into this nation's existence. Not until near the end of the Civil War would President Lincoln actually declare an annual Thanksgiving holiday observance. Before that, each announced day of prayer and thanksgiving was in response to a particular recent event. During the colonial period, those events were almost exclusively military victories over, and sometimes wholesale slaughter of, native peoples, with seizure of their lands and stores of food. And it was not until the turn of the 20th century, when America was wrestling with industrialization and new generations of immigrants, that the romantic myth of the Pilgrims and Indians' Thanksgiving feast first arose. The trouble is, it's pretty easy to agree that Columbus isn't someone we really need to celebrate. But it's hard to argue that giving thanks in itself is a bad idea. Indeed, it's a central concept shared by most indigenous spiritual teachings, and it's something that both hardened humanists and committed Christians can agree on. Gratitude is good for us. So how do we decolonize the celebration of gratitude? I'm not sure that I know the whole answer to this question, but I do know they say that when you find yourself in a hole, the first thing to do is put down the shovel. We can certainly learn to celebrate home and family and many blessings without rehearsing the genocidal myths of a colonizing history. We can begin to learn something about the native communities that were violently displaced to make room for the towns and buildings and neighborhoods that are right here where we and our families live now. That would mean for us understanding the ways of the Osage and the Missouria and the Otos, as well as the Shawnee and the Wyandot as they pass through. I am sad to say that I am no expert, but I mean to learn more. The plants teach us, Robin Kimmerer says. How can I, like the common plantain, with my colonist roots, naturalize to this place? Become not an invader, but an adopted member of the community. Be humble, says White Man's Footstep. Don't make it all about you. Recognize those who were here first. Don't just take over. Make space for other people, other stories. Be useful. Offer yourself as a good pot of greens in the spring, as medicine that protects the injured. Be a force for healing. Thanksgiving itself can teach us, if we want it to, writes Chef Sean Sherman and Oglala Lakota Sioux, who suggests that decolonizing can be located on the table right in front of us, in the food. Many people may not realize it, he says, but most of our Thanksgiving recipes are made with indigenous foods: turkey, corn, squash, beans, pumpkins, maple, cranberries, wild rice, and the like. We should embrace this. No matter where you are in North America, you are on indigenous land. And so on this holiday, or any day really, I urge people to explore a deeper connection to what are called American foods by understanding true Native American histories, to begin using what grows naturally around us, and to support Native American growers. There is no need to make Thanksgiving about a false past. It is so much better when it celebrates the beauty of the present. He's right, I think, about more than food. Decolonizing ourselves begins in repentance and the work of repairing injury, because that is the right thing to do. But it ends in the recognition that commitment to a false past will always separate us from the gifts that grow naturally around us and from the true beauty of the present. Holidays and holy days are universal facets of human culture. We hunger for the richness, dimension, and meaning that they add to our lives. And they are powerful teachers, those celebrations. The foods and the altars and the greeting card images all convey stories about who we are and what matters to us. So let us take seriously our responsibility to be thoughtful about those lessons, so that they lead us toward inclusion rather than arrogance, to humility rather than exploitation, to honor rather than erase our neighbors, to remember the past for the sake of healing rather than perpetuating its terrors. For that opportunity, forever present in our shared humanity. Ojali Heliga. Let's stand and sing. but of course not the light of truth, or the warmth of community, or the fires of commitment. For all these we carry in our minds and hearts until we are together again. And so for the sun and the dawn, which we did not create, for the moon and the evening, which we did not make, for the flame that we kindle but that is not ours to own, for this gathered company, which welcomes us as we are, from wherever we have come, for all things that come to us as gifts of being from sources beyond ourselves, may our lives be touched with wonder, with gratitude, and with praise. So be it.